All right. Welcome to the HVAC Guide live show. My name is Josh, and we will be answering your questions live. Sometimes we are joined by other pros in the chat who might know answers to questions that I don't. Let's be honest, that's not hard to do. Tonight, we have a special guest that is an expert in our industry. But before we bring on Tersh, let's take a moment to take care of a few housekeeping matters. The first one being I did a poll on our YouTube channel a couple weeks ago, and we asked you folks, would you rather, which do you like when we have guests? Do you like when I do solo shows and just answer questions? And the poll came back of you guys like both. You guys want a mix of both. So next week, it'll just be this fat face. I am on the road next week. I'll be at Vid Summit. It's this big conference that Mr. Beast and all these other crazy YouTubers, I'll act like that I'm a big deal while I'm there, I'm sure. So I will be on the road next week, but we will be here live. I'll be doing my best to do a decent show, but we will be solo. I'll be answering your questions live next week. So make sure you're here for that. Same time, same place. The other thing is we are streaming to all the major podcasts now. So if you prefer listening to audio instead of, seeing this fat face, you're welcome to check us out on all the major platforms. Do me a favor. If you're listening to this, stop for a moment, leave us a 5-star review, little comment on the podcast, whatever platform you use. And the other thing is, YouTube's been kind of holding us down a little bit. The algorithm has been kind of holding our content back a little bit. So let's fight back. If you don't mind, if you could just hit that like button and of course, subscribe if you haven't already. That said, let's take a moment to pay the bills and thank the sponsor of tonight's show. I want to thank the sponsor of tonight's show, Easy Fit Isolator Valves. I've seen a lot of products in my years of doing HVAC and plumbing, but I haven't seen many where I've said every HVAC and plumbing service vehicle should have one of those. The Easy Fit Isolator Valve is one of those products. I personally think so many jobs in my past, having one of these would have made my and my customers' lives so much better. This valve can allow for easy installation without shutting off the main water shutoff, making so many applications possible. The homeowner or business owner stays operational while the HVAC mechanic or plumber looks like the hero. I'll put a link in the description of this video or the chat. Get yourself one today to have on hand for that emergency we all know will come. Tonight's guest is an expert in the HVAC industry. This episode, guys, this is a special one. I've been looking forward to this one. When I started my business, Griffin Air, there was a handful of podcasts and other media that I followed, but there was one that I followed more than any other, and I consumed every episode. I considered the host of that show to be a mentor, even if he didn't even know who I was. And tonight, we have the original host of that show as a guest. He's a seasoned entrepreneur and co-founder of Trade Automation Pros, a company specializing in enhancing operational efficiency through the automation of skilled trades industries. He also owns Service Emperor Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric, as well as TriStar Mechanical. Additionally, Tersh co-owns Skilled Trades Syndicate, a podcast production company, and hosts Service Business Mastery Podcast, the world's largest home services podcast with over 165,000 monthly downloads. Tersh's automation expertise and extensive experience in the HVAC, plumbing, and electrical service industries make him a leading voice in the trades. With a passion for teaching others how to optimize and automate their businesses, Tersh is known as the GOAT of podcasting in the trades, and I will not disagree with that. Everyone, please welcome Tersh Blissett.
That's cool.
Let's go. They were lined up outside for you, sir.
Oh man, I'm excited. First off, I'm honored to be here. I appreciate it truly, and honored to learn more about the fact that you've been a fan for years. That's really cool. I truly am honored by that. And I'd love to hear more about this. The isolator valve. I mean, that thing is pretty slick. This is the first time I've even heard of it.
It's really cool. I guess they used to have something like that back in the 90s, and then they made it better or something like that. I was talking to the
Oh,
guy that we've been kind of chatting back and forth, and he showed it to me, and I was like, why doesn't every van, every service
yeah.
vehicle in America have one of these on there?
That's
Really
water
cool.
only, correct?
It is for
Okay.
now, as far as I know.
Yeah. So it's not like refrigerant. So you could like pinch it off and replace a compressor or whatever and
Wouldn't that be
not have
cool?
to. That would be slick.
I don't know why they don't put more valves for certain things anyway, but I was just talking to somebody else the other day about that. They were like, "Why don't we have ball valves for everything?" But I guess
Other
it'd be
than
one more
leaking.
joints to leak, you
Yeah,
know.
probably. Yeah, you're right. But yeah, no, I mean, I love, you know, I love everything about podcasting and the fact that the people who support podcasters and YouTubers and stuff like that, I want to support them because they support you because I felt that pain. I went years and years without any kind of support as far as like external support. I always had the support of my family and stuff, but uh, to have someone monetarily, say pony up some cash, saying I think you're doing a good thing and I want to support you. I appreciate those individuals 100%.
Yeah. I don't know how you feel, but I've always been like, if there wasn't this thing called the internet and there wasn't some of the, like I'm probably more heavily YouTube, and it sounds like you're more podcast.
Hmm.
You probably I do other things, but that's kind of where I've leaned into. But anyway, I've always said if there wasn't a YouTube, I'd probably still be just this lowly guy. Maybe I'd have 15, 20 employees by now, hopefully,
Yeah.
but I'd still be just fixing air conditioners in Little Hartfield, Virginia, if there
Yeah.
wasn't this thing called the internet. It's crazy.
Oh, 100%. Like I I'd be in the exact same boat. I literally was listening to podcasts and I was listening to Brian Orr, and because I was tired of listening to books on tape, and I figured out that a couple of the authors had their own podcast. So that's what started me on listening to podcasts. And then I was like, hey Brian, if you ever want to talk business, I'd love to be on the show and talk business. And then that kind of snowballed into him helping me start my podcast. And man, back then we didn't even do video. Like video wasn't even a thing really when I first started podcasting. So it was more like a phone conversation that you would have with people, and it was wild getting started. It was wild thinking back now to like there was no video anything. It literally I had to think up things. How am I going to keep people's attention just having an audio podcast? And it'd be interesting, and we're going to talk about business and we're going to talk about HVAC, which some people find the most boring things in the world. So it was like, how are we going to make this interesting? So and for me, it eventually has morphed into automation, and I didn't know that back in '05 or '07 when I was a service manager building out automations inside of an Excel spreadsheet that's the beginning of a passion that's now a career. I mean, I build out automations all day, every day for different companies. And it started with an Excel spreadsheet. And it was just me trying to not do the same meaningless task, mind numbing task over and over again. I was like, I'm done with this nonsense. So, but it's kind of, and then without the internet, I would have no idea how to do half of the things that I do because I'm not normally the type of person that will ask somebody. Um, well, I take that back. I won't ask the people that are right around me questions, but I'll ask a complete stranger all kinds of questions. It's a weird concept, but and the
Oh, that's a
internet's
good point. Yeah, because I was just talking to so I sold my business and now I teach classes, and one of the guys was uh he's my boss actually. He was telling me today that the smaller the class, the less they are afraid to ask a question in front of others. And I was like, I never really considered that, but it's sort of like what you're just talking about.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about what they think, even if you ask a dumb question.
Yeah, 100%. And so now I'm comfortable with it now. I'm comfortable with being the one that looks like an idiot in front of everybody else. I don't mind that anymore. I tell people this all the time, and even though I've said this, and I didn't reveal this early on in the podcast, but one of the main reasons that I started my podcast was because I had a speech impediment, and then it was actually 2 or 3 years after I started the podcast that I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and that's part of why. Like I was diagnosed with adult ADHD and dyslexia, along with the speech impediment, and so I was like, wow, like I had no idea the struggles that I was going through, but just doing the podcast, getting in front of people. That's how I did that. I forced myself to work around this fear, that just an overcoming fear of basically public speaking. And so in my mind, I was like, all right, now I'm a public speaker. Even though it's just me talking into a camera or a microphone. But then it's like, but you have a couple thousand people who listen to you. But then you get in front of those same thousand people and you're like, oh crap, I don't think I am a public speaker. Like this is, this is kind of tough, but it's, what's up, man? Yeah. So I don't know, man. The internet has definitely, it's allowed us to connect with people that we would have never connected with before.
Yeah, I didn't know that story about Brian Orr. That you know, for those of you that don't know, he's kind of the OG. I mean,
Yep.
he has one of the largest YouTube channels and
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, and I mean, HVAC school. Anybody that wants to learn, I mean, in
Yeah.
fact, I'll have people come to my classes. I'll have guys starting out, and they'll say, I want to move up fast. How do? And I tell them every time. I'm like, okay, if you're serious, go home every night for and I'm not even asking you to watch 20 videos a night. Watch 2 videos every night for the next 2 months of
Mm-hmm.
Craig Migliaccio's and Brian Orr's, and you'll know more than most of the people that come to my
Dude.
classes.
Oh my gosh. It's wild. I mean, when I started out, I don't know if you have this in Virginia, but we don't have it in Georgia, and I actually don't think they have it in Alabama anymore. But they had something through Alabama Power where you would go to Alabama Power, and it was a week-long course, and it was basically like 2 years of tech school crammed into a week. Like it was a cram course of learning a lot of stuff, and it was not expensive, but you just had to pay for the technician to get there, pay for the room and board, and their meal. Actually, the meals were covered with the thing, and I think it was like $100 or something like that, which is probably why they're not doing it anymore, because they were losing so much money on it. But man, I learned so much stuff in there. It was one of those things where I was like, man, I'm starving for information. But I went in there and the people were like, what's up, Tony? So that's actually, Tony is my one of my business partners, and
Cool.
in Service Emperor, and a right hand guy for me. But he, so I guess Florida Power still has it. But I went to that class, and I was like, there's probably like 30 of us in this class, and it was this old turbine building in the side of a hydro plant, and like in a dungeon. But we took the very first day we took the entry exam, and then the last day we took the exit exam to see, and it was the exact same exam, so you could see how much you learned over the period of that week. And the very first day I took the exam, I think I only got 2 questions right out of everything, and the instructor was like, "Dude, are you kidding? Did you purposely do this?" And I was like, no, man, I don't know any of this stuff. Like, this is all French to me. And so when I took the exit exam, I passed with flying colors, and I got like the most improved award or whatever. And I went from, I think I got 2 questions right on the entrance, and I got 2 questions wrong on the exit. Like I literally, but I was just everything I could do to absorb all that information. If I had like Craig and Trevor and Brian and Jim Bergman and Bill Spohn, these guys, like if I had them back then, man, I don't think I could take over the world, but man, I'd be close to it. It was just the amount of information that's there now is crazy.
Nuts.
How much is there, and how available it is. And I became friends with Jim and Bill through Brian, through Brian in the podcast and stuff. And I remember, like it was yesterday, I was listening to Brian's podcast. I was on the tractor mowing. I was like clear cutting property, and Jim Bergman was on there talking about the True Blue hoses. And he was like, "You want to pull a good vacuum? Like, let's go to this." And he went through the whole True Blue thing, and putting the caps on the ends of your hoses after you pull the vacuum and all this other stuff. And I'm like, man, this is stuff I've never done. Like, pull Schrader valves out to pull a vacuum. Like, this stuff's all French to me. And then I go and watch him. I watch a video of Jim doing this in like 5 minutes, pulling down a 5-ton unit or a 4-ton unit or something. I was like, nah, get out of here. And I call up Jim, and he's one of those guys where, like, if you get his cell phone number and you call him, he'll sit there and talk to you for hours. I'm like, this is crazy. This is wild.
Yeah, Jim's a really cool guy.
He is.
He I remember exactly where I was standing. I had a conversation with him one time about there's so many like, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it, but there's like so many like I don't know, like websites or organizations. I mean, you could even lump ACA into this, where you're either in or out type thing. And I was trying to talk Jim into creating something like that with Measure Quick or something where you're either in or out. And if you're not in, well, you probably aren't doing things correctly type deal. I was trying hard to talk him into that concept, and never quite got him there. I think he's like, we just want to do good work, and and I don't know, he's just a really smart, cool guy. In fact, I've done a couple videos with him, and
with Jim.
Yeah.
He's great. Like, he was down for a little bit there where he was sick, and man, it broke my heart. Like, I was like, Jim, man, you gotta get better, dude. Like, I need to see you, because we go to the HVAC school symposium every year, and I'm talking on the last day, because that's when the business panel is on the last day. And if you've made it to that and you stick it through there, then like, you are glutton for punishment. But it's fun because I get to hang out with Jim and Bill and all those guys. Christopher Hughes, I don't know if y'all know Christopher Hughes, and Steve Rogers and all those guys from what's it's True Flow Grid. Christopher's gonna kill me whenever he sees this. Oh man, it's too late in the day for me.
I'm trying to Google it real fast.
True Flow. It's the oh my gosh. TEC.
Okay.
The Energy Conservatory. Golly, man. Sorry, Steve. See,
buddy. That's the thing. When you're live, you were talking about not being afraid to look like the dumb person in a room.
No,
I tell everybody, do a live show. You look like an idiot.
You have to be comfortable in your own skin to be able to live stream. That's for sure.
There's no editing it out. I've had people get on here and ask questions, and I'm like, I should know the answer to that, but I'm not going to lie to you.
Let's hit the pause button. Where's that pause button at?
Exactly. Bathroom break. Be right back.
Yeah.
Let me Google that.
That's hilarious.
So let's change gears for a second. Let's go back to a young Tersh back in the day. What how did you get here? Like, how did you get into HVAC, and then how did you get into becoming the GOAT?
Man, it's such a crazy story. So my plan in life was to be an engineer. I knew I was going to go in the Air Force, but that was kind of the extent of it. I didn't really have anybody, and this is one of the things that I'm very intentional with my kids on having a conversation. no one ever said, like, no one would ever really answer questions for me as far as like life in general, like what am I going to do in life? And it was always kind of like that generic, just do what makes you happy, and then the money will come. I'm like, okay, whatever. So it took me a while. I was in college. I was actually um, in college right out of Air Force. I knew that I didn't want to be in the Air Force as I was going through that, because I was going through as TAC P, and I don't know if anybody knows what TAC P is, but it's controller, basically the people that hold the lasers for laser guided missiles,
Oh
the
wow.
call in airstrikes.
Okay.
You see a video, and you see movies where you have like the guy that's on the radio calling in the airstrikes with the SEAL team or with the Rangers, or with the Marine recons. Like that's usually a TAC P. Like that's an Air Force guy, and that's what I did in the Air Force. And so we were special operations unit, and typically back then it was like an 18-month life expectancy in combat. So you weren't expected to live a whole long time. When I got out, like when it was time to get out, it was one of those things where they were like, all right, you're going to re-enlist for 6 years or you have to get out. And I was like, deuces, I'm out. And so then I went back. I finished. I was in school. I went to school, and was at Georgia Tech. I was fortunate enough to where my parents pushed me really hard in when I was younger, and so when I was in high school, I was taking college classes through Georgia Tech, and so it was just a natural progression to go there. And so I went to school for engineering. I liked it, but then in the real world, I hated it. And so I left working from a chemical plant to a buddy of mine that actually didn't even finish high school. He was a service technician at a HVAC company. We both were car guys. Every night we would hang out, in my shop, and we were working on Mustangs or whatever. We were working on trucks. We had like LS swapped S10s slammed on the ground, and supercharged and nitrous and turbocharged Mustangs, and we were working on these every night. But he was making just as much money as I was, and he was an HVAC technician that didn't graduate high school. And I was like, bro, you seem to enjoy what you're doing. I want a job doing what you're doing. So he was like, I can get you an introduction, but I can't guarantee you a job. And he introduced me to Fred, and who owned the HVAC company that he worked for. And I started working there, and it was off to the races. 2 years later, I was a service manager, and then
Wow.
became general manager. And this is so I got hired in '05, and it was '07, I think it was, when I was a service manager. And we grew from right at $1 million to 8 million through the recession. So everybody, like we had a lot of competition that was dropping like flies. They did a lot of new construction, and we never did new construction. We were always doing, like, I say never. We didn't do a lot of new construction. We did very little. We were doing mainly, for the most part, we were doing service work. We were flat rate, like the original, Callahan Roach flat rate book. Like we had the green big old binders in the van. Like we killed it when it came to flat rate pricing and service work. And so we just, we grew through that time period. And it's funny because the coaching organization that we used, is the BDR, which they're still around now. And I would fly out to Seattle, and they were like, why do you do everything that we say to do? And I'm like, because I don't know another way of doing it. Like like Fred took the BDR handbook, and it's like, here, Tersh, here's what you do. And I'm like, great. Because at that time, like the internet was there, but it was like more forums and stuff. It wasn't like it is now. There wasn't a Facebook. There wasn't like all these gurus out there on the internet just giving this crappy advice. Like I didn't have anything but that BDR binder. So when I had a question, I just went to that binder, and so there wasn't any of the bad information for Fred to get rid of whenever it came time. And I wasn't going to wing it, because it was like I will do stupid crap with my money, but I won't do stupid crap with other people's money. And so it's like one of those things where I'm like, all right, I'm going to definitely, if I'm not sure about it, we're going to go to the BDR book. If I have a question about it, even then I'll call, the folks over at BDR. And, it was crazy how successful it was. And it was funny because I get asked questions like, why do you do it that way? I'm like, well, that's what the book said to do. Like, is it good or bad? I don't know, but I just did what the book said. And they're like, no, it's great.
One heck of a book.
Oh, it was a massive, it was like one of them 4-inch thick binders. And it was like an encyclopedia where you just like flipping pages and stuff. It got to where like it was fun. It was stressful at times, but it was fun because it also wasn't my money. I mean, you know how it is when it's your money and you're like, oh man, this is like, if I make a bad decision, like I'm out this money, I'm out this 30 grand, or I'm out this whatever. Especially if you didn't have any money to fall back on, like, because every company that I've done, we've bootstrapped the company. So we started it with no external funding. I say that, except for the very last company that we've started, we've had money to throw into it, our own personal money. But I still don't have outside money, coming in that you have to, because when you get that outside money, you have to answer to their questions, what I mean? Or their, I say questions. Sometimes it feels like condescending questions. They're like, why are you doing it like that? Like, I'm like, oh, it just works. You're like, do I need to like break it down to you? Do you want to come do it? And I mean, I want to say that I wouldn't say that, but, when you're doing it with your own money though, you don't have to answer those questions to anybody else. But then again, you don't have any more money to fall back on unless you have some sort of line of credit or something like that. And which I will tell you, if anybody that is out there that's starting their own business, like, work your way towards being able to have a line of credit as fast as possible, because while you don't want to use it, it's still there. Like, there's this old proverb about the guy that wrote a $500,000 check. He wrote this, business owner a $500,000 check, and the business owner, and he said, cash this in case of an emergency, cash this check. And, you can use that as your fallback, but only use it if you absolutely have to have it. But then the guy was running his business and he ran it as if, okay, I have this $500,000 to fall back on if I ever need it. Well, so he was wildly successful, long story short, he had this check in his desk drawer. Well, one day he takes it to the bank and it's like, hey, I don't need this, but is the money there? Like, I was going to throw it away. I was going to shred it. But before I did that, I wanted to see, like, is the money even there? And they're like, no, that bank account's never had more than about $50 in it.
Wow.
And the guy's just he's running his life off the fact that he had this money to fall back on. And if he didn't have that money to fall back on, he would have been a lot more risk adverse, and he would have been a lot more cautious with the things.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. So it sort of changes your tactics.
Oh yeah, 100%. And so if you had that line of credit, you don't have to use that line of credit, but it's there to fall back on. And what I'm saying is not something I'm preaching what I do. I'm not preaching what I do. Like, I'm guilty of that myself. Like, I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't need a line of credit. I'm not going to pay the, $100, $500 fee per year, whatever it is, just to have it and not use it. But then there's times where I'm like, man, it'd be nice to have that cash right now. So I can, like, I have the power just to pay cash for that, whatever, and not deal with the people. Like, during COVID, when vehicle prices were crazy, like that was the time to really, to do that. I was lucky. We were fortunate, Tony and I and our crew were fortunate. We had extra vehicles. So when that time came, we just lucked up, and we were able to, like, actually sell a couple of the vehicles that we weren't using, and, like, for fat profit off of those. But then I was like, all right, let's don't sell too many of these things, because if we need to buy one, we're going to be buying one. We're going to be way over paying for one. And we actually did do that. We actually did way overpay for our truck.
So I do want to, I mean, not that it matters, but you mentioned that you started a few businesses. I remember when I used to listen to your show, it was not called Service Emperor. It was like Icebound or something like
Yep.
that. So
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
happened? Did that morph into what it is now, or did you sell that
It did.
business?
So, so I had TriStar. Oh, I didn't even finish that story. Yeah. I left Kennedy's, Fred Kennedy's, place in 2012. And I actually bought a trucking company. Well, I actually bought it before I left,
You bought a
Fred.
trucking company. What have you
Yeah.
not done, sir?
Wild. Yeah. It was a trucking company. It was the over the road trucking company, like 10 car haulers. And, I would go, um, to the state line of North Carolina, South Carolina state line, and pick up, 10 cars and drive them down to Daytona, Florida, uh, from a car auction. And I just loved it because I'm a gearhead. Like I loved it. But then I did that for, man, I did it for probably about a year, maybe a year and a half. I had some drivers for me. Like it turned into like a fleet. And so then it turned into a job. And so then I was like, everything's breaking. If it can be broken, a driver's going to break it because it's not theirs. And the most crazy things, like, how do you break that? Like, I don't think that's breakable, but you broke it. And then I got to the point where like I had a buddy of mine who was still in the air conditioning. Actually, I hired him, Lance. He's one of my best friends. He's now a train TM, but he I hired him at Kennedy's, at Fred Kennedy's. He's still at He was still at Fred's shop, and every now and then I would talk him into going on a road trip with me. And the last time that it happened, the truck that we were driving wasn't a bad truck, but it was just, and it never gave me problems at all. But that one time it gave me problems, and I was like, Lance, I think I'm wasting a talent here. Like I think I'm on the road because it's fun, but I have a ton of knowledge in my brain that I'm just wasting. And so that's whenever I actually, it was probably like a week later, I sold everything. I sold all the trucks, and started up TriStar. And it was the weirdest circumstances because I met Tim, who was my business partner with TriStar, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I've been thinking about getting into the mechanical side of things." He had the largest flooring distributor in Savannah, and he was the largest paint purchaser from Sherwin-Williams, because he did a lot of flips, like not flips, turns. So like when somebody would move out of an apartment, they would go in and do a whole remodel basically in a week, less than a week. He's like, but I always have to sub out the HVAC mechanical, and the plumbing and the electrical. And he was like, I've been wanting to start an HVAC company, or a, HVAC, plumbing and electrical company. And I was like, well, now's the time, good a time as any. And I had already gotten my state license, because I wanted to get my license before, like while I was still in everybody's good graces. I didn't want to be like disappear and then come back and be like, hey, you remember me? Like, will you sign my state license so I can get it? So I already had my license. And so we started up a company, and that was in 2014. And that was when TriStar began. And so we started TriStar, and it was very low margin, high volume. Like a service tech would run 12 service calls a day. Like they're still that way. Like that's how TriStar is. TriStar's still in business. I haven't actually stepped foot in there since 2019. I rode by there last week, 2 weeks ago, and I almost
Do
stopped.
they remember who you are?
Yeah, I talk to them all the time. We actually hang out at the Savannah Bananas baseball games all the time. Like we'll
Oh,
go
nice.
there and hang out, because we have season tickets to there. But I didn't even stop by there. I mean, I didn't stop when I rode by there, and I was like, you know what, I should stop. And I was like, nah, why break a streak? Like I haven't been in there since 2019, so might as well just ride on by. And but yeah, I was working there when and I was in the office and everything whenever I first met Brian Orr. When I was actually in my office at TriStar whenever I was recording the podcast with Brian. And I was friends with Brandon, who owned Icebound at the time. And he was like, man, you got to get out of that low margin stuff. That's too stressful. And I was like, we really killed it with Kennedy's with Fred's shop, and that was the exact opposite of what I'm doing right now. So maybe I should get back into this. And he was like, you know what? As a matter of fact, I don't want to be in this at all anymore. So I'll sell you my company. And I was like, this is the easy button. Like, I already have a company and all this stuff. What I didn't realize, I mean, it was like the friendship clouded the judgment that I had there. The clientele that he had was terrible clientele for what I did. Like, yeah, he only ran 3 service calls a day because they were so damn needy. Like, they wouldn't let go of him. And then they had to have him because he was a one-man shop, and they were like, I gotta have him for every time that somebody comes out. I'm like, look, he doesn't work here anymore. He sold the company to us, and like, we're trying to grow it this way. So that was in, was it 2018 or 2019? Anyways, at the end of that year, whatever year it was, I completely rebranded, basically fired all of the clientele. During that almost year time period leading up to that, I had hired 2 or 3 techs. One of them was a friend of mine. He was moving, so that was like cool. The other guys, I was like, y'all got to go because y'all have a terrible, like, y'all dropped down to the level of what the clientele that we're getting rid of liked, and I don't want anything to do with that. So they moved on to better places, and then we rebranded, brought on some new guys, and that's how Service Emperor came about. I purchased a lot of debt is what I basically did, because if I kept the clientele and they had actually made money, I would have been good, but it would have required me to be there in the van every day. And I knew, like, that was my whole thing, was like, I'm going to start this company and I'm not going to be in the van. Like, I'm not going to use my own tools. I'm not going to, like, all of this, like, it's going to be remote, because that was my big thing. We're going to be remote. We're going to be paperless. And people were looking at me like I had 3 heads when I said that. I would say that on a podcast, and they're like, remote? How are you going to do a remote HVAC company? And how are you going to be paperless? And that was at the beginning of cloud-based CRMs. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is the cat's meow. I don't have to have a server. I don't have to do it at the office. People don't have to hand in paperwork for me to read, and like read chicken scratch and all that sort of stuff. Like, this is great. This is exactly what I want. And people were like, oh, you can't do that. And I was like, all right, now that you've said I can't do it, I'm definitely going to do it now. And so Service Emperor happened. We were remote. We've still been remote since then. Actually Tony and JJ, they were actually up at the property today, working on a plumbing job here, for a house we're building. And I kind of haven't really looked back. Tony kind of really is taking over the reins of Service Emperor, because I've focused so much. Where you focus, you'll grow. And I focused on the podcast. About last year before last, I was like, all right, Tony came in as a partner, and I said, all right, I'm going to focus on the podcast and growing the podcast, because it was a hobby before then. And so then the podcast it took off, because that's where I was, that's where I was focusing. And I don't regret that at all. I mean, I regret not focusing on Service Emperor as much, because it could have grown a whole lot more. But I knew that I wanted to grow the podcast too. So, and you can't focus on everything, or else you won't focus on anything. So
that's really cool. Quite the journey you've had, sir.
It is. Yeah. And then this year we started an AI company, an AI and automation company, which has been a wild ride too, because if you're not familiar with software developers, it's a completely different world than it is like doing HVAC technicians or anything like that,
Interesting. And what's that company called?
Trade Automation Pros. That's right. Trade Automation Pros is the AI company. We're actually building out a product called Phone Tap. It's actually finished now. And it's the phones. It basically, whenever your CSRs miss a lead, like they actually drop the ball on a lead, or didn't close a lead, didn't book a call, it instantly notifies whoever, whether you want it to be the CSR you notify, or the CSR manager or the owner of the company, service manager, whoever, and it'll say, hey, look, this lead wasn't booked because of X, Y, and Z. It could be that the CSR just couldn't book it, or it could be that, hey, look, this they had a price objection and they just couldn't get over paying the $79 or $95 or whatever the consultation fee is. You may want to reach back out to them and offer to do a discount to get the, if you're slow enough. And but it does it instantly. It's like real time, and it does call sentiment. So like it'll tell you like when you lost the call, like when you lost the customer in the call conversation and stuff like that. And it's all automated and AI, and it's the wildest thing in the world. 5 years ago, wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it's crazy the different things we're starting to see. I remember we had a CRM that you would just literally, I mean, it's not AI. It was just literally an automation that you would click, hey, I'm on the, I'm going to go to this job now, and they would get a text.
Yeah.
Hey,
That was
Josh
the
is
coolest
on the
thing.
way.
Yes.
And I just remember being like, this
Yeah.
is the game changer right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. and then the game changer was it clocks you into the job as soon as you arrive. Like it geo-fenced you at the address. And I'm like, oh yes. Now I don't have to worry about people forgetting to click that they've arrived. Like this is game changer. And then now you're looking at AI stuff that's actually like I built out a chat bot that actually edits the guy's job summary. So it takes all of the industry jargon out of the conversation, and all they have to, like you can put the most industry like jargon stuffed job summary into this thing, and it will spit out things that it's supposed to be at a 6th grade reading comprehension level. So a 6th grader should be able to understand the output from this chatbot. And
I had the perfect employee that would have been. I love him. Genuinely love the guy. On a personal level, I'm blessed to know him, to have known him, and to have employed him. But anyway, he's I don't know how old he is now. He's like 70 something. He was still my best guy. I mean, he could run circles around 20-year-olds and could build the most beautiful duct transition. I mean, I was more on the electrical side of things, and he was always more on the ductwork side of things. So it was just always great. But anyway, he would fill out some of his tickets, and I'd be like, what? What did you? I said, Kenny, are you using voice to text? I mean, what are you doing here? And anyway, as you were talking, I just thought of him. So
yeah. Oh yeah. No, Tony's not bad. Now JJ does do voice to text, and because we're in South Georgia, we used to have this guy. I won't say his name, but Tony knows exactly who I'm talking about, and he had a thick accent. Now he's moved back home now, so he's not with us anymore. Man, because when you talk to him on the phone, you could barely understand what he's saying, and he was adamant that he was going to do voice to text. And that thing would give the most wild, conversations would be spit out of that thing. And I'm like, if I read it out loud, I can totally see, like, I understand it because I understand the way he talks. But he's from South Alabama, and he had a lot of twang in everything that he said. And I mean, I love that kid to death, but man, those job summaries, those invoice summaries, oh wow, they are rough. I'll come across a couple of them every now and then. I'm like, man, why didn't we edit this? Like, what I accidentally send this to somebody? Like, this is embarrassing. I mean,
that was the worst part. The tickets would go to the customer.
I know.
So it would say description, and I remember there was one, and I don't remember exactly what it was, so I'm just paraphrasing, but I remember it said the XB, like Bumblebee or something. It was something like that.
Like,
and of course that's TXV. And my the lady that worked for us, that I don't even know what her title was, because she basically ran the joint. She ran me. She was the smartest one in the room all the time. But anyway, I remember her sending me the invoice, and I was like, what? and then I called Kenny, and he's like, I don't know, whatever it
Oh,
was,
yeah.
I don't know what I
He
was saying.
can't decipher his own conversation that he had. Yeah, I could see that.
That is so cool, though. And that's the world we're moving to, and
It is.
it's a good thing in a lot of respects because I mean I can think of a lot of instances where the ball was dropped. I mean we're starting to see more technology where the warranty gets registered automatically. Where so
Mm,
I know some of the
yeah.
OEMs are playing with different things for that on that front, and all these things. It's just so cool to see the industry. It's changing so fast in a good way. I think.
hmm
I
Yeah, we were
welcome it all.
the warranty thing. We were wanting to build something out for that, and everybody I talked to, they were like, "Oh yeah, it's a piece of cake." Blah blah blah. I was like, "Well, let's do it," and they're like, "I don't know," and I was like, "I don't think it's as easy as you're saying it is because
Uh huh.
every manufacturer has a different page, and they call different things. So it's not like you could just automatically form fill everything over into a different manufacturer. Uh, Apparently, I actually interviewed somebody about a year ago, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we did that. We just had to we had to get in touch with all the manufacturers, and they had to allow us the back end of their program, which that was the difficult part because they didn't want some random Joe Schmo in the back end of their system.
Ah,
And
interesting.
yeah, and so I was like, "Oh, cool, you negotiated that part of it. Like that's the hard part of it was getting all that information." But I was like, "Nah, I'm not interested in that. I don't think the ROI is there for the effort that it would take to do that because I mean, realistically, how much is somebody going to pay, an automated program to do this? How much to get rid of an employee doing it?
Right.
I don't know. It would take a lot of time to recoup the money that it would take to invest it because you probably spend $100,000 building the program out to do that.
Yeah. 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 Especially, yeah. I mean, a good one for sure.
Sure, yeah.
Um, so let me ask you this, because you're working on so many different things. What's the future hold? Are you working on anything are you working on anything you're not supposed to tell us, but you're just gonna you're just gonna tell us,
Let it air out
because
there.
you're in that frame of mind.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, no, not really, because I share everything that I do, probably to a fault, honestly. The phone taps is one that's really, yeah, 72 is a new 25. I say that when I turned 40, I was like, I don't think 40 is that old anymore. Like, I feel like 40 was old when I was 30. Now it's not that old.
My wife and I say this. We just literally talked about that the other night. She's because you know, unfortunately, we had a really good friend of ours pass away, and he was way, way, way too young. But he was still at an age where I remember thinking as a kid being like, oh, well, that's pretty old.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
he's,
Oh, okay. Well, he's done his days,
yeah, yeah,
out to
he's
pasture.
early 50s, he was on his
Yeah.
deathbed
Yeah.
probably,
Pretty much.
crazy, man.
Yeah, I
Crazy.
know. Man. And my grandma just had her 80th birthday, and she's just bebopping around like a young lady. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. But no, I mean, as far as things in the pipeline for us personally, speed to lead type things, any kind of automation that's easier to automate, building automations for companies. There's a new program out that's called Wink. It's not my program, but it's one that I'm finding is making things easier because I don't know if anybody's familiar with Zapier, which is it's a connecting program between software platforms. So like if you have Service Titan or Sarah or House Call Pro or something like that, and you want to build more automations, you can get your API from those CRMs, put it into Zapier, and then build out an automation that every time something happens, then it automatically sends an email to somebody else, or it automatically sends a Slack message to someone. And the Zapier is great. If you know how to code, it's even better. Same with make.com and another program called If This Then That. But it's challenging. If you're really good at doing air conditioning and you're really good at running an air conditioning company, it's not smart of you to spend your time learning how to build automations, build Zapier, do all this stuff. Like, you need to keep focusing on running an air conditioning company, running a plumbing company, providing the best customer service that you could possibly do. I just happen to have this knack that I really enjoyed learning about automation, more so than I even enjoy running an HVAC company. And so, but this program, Wink, is actually supposed to. It's easier to use than, say, a Zapier for a business owner that doesn't know how to code, write code out. And so, I think that's really like having these low code or no code options for automation, and then using AI. Like, honestly, if you're not using Chat GPT already, like, do it. I wouldn't say you have missed the boat, but you're close to it. Like, there's so much craziness going on right now. Like, I could literally take a screenshot of a picture of like a website and say, hey, write me the code for this website to duplicate this website's user experience. And you could throw that into Claude, or Anthropic's competitor to Chat GPT. You could throw it in there and it'll literally write you out the code to build that website. And it's like, wow, like, that's crazy. Like, it's just the wildest thing. Like, I don't have to know how to build code, use code, or write code anymore. I literally can just ask these these large language models to write the code for me. And then if it doesn't work, if I get an error code, I don't have to figure it out. I just copy the error code, paste it into the AI tool. And then it's like, oh yeah, this is the problem, blah, blah, blah. Here's the new code. Boom, throw it in there. And then it works magically. And you're like, huh, wow, this is weird. Like, I didn't have to actually learn anything. Like, it just did it for me. So I'm like, it's going to make people dumber. Like, there's no way around it. But at the same time, it's the people who are going to succeed and they're going to really excel are the ones that don't allow it to make them dumber, but like, allow the tool to make them smarter. So, like, instead of just allowing Chat GPT to fix the code for you, say, what was broken about the code? Explain to me why it was broken. And if you're willing to do that and read that, learn it, like, it's going to be crazy how it's going to be like learning on steroids. Because one of the things I hated about school, 100% hated about school, was I was being forced to learn things that I didn't want to learn. And they weren't letting me learn the things that I wanted to learn. And, like, sure, I was in physics as a junior. Like, I took college physics my junior year of high school because I loved physics. Like, I loved everything about it. Plus, I was super excited about going to Six Flags because of physics. So, I mean, I enjoyed physics, so I excelled at it. I despised reading books. So, like, I didn't graduate with any kind of AP anything with English. Like, it was, let's do the bare minimum and let's just get graduated. You know what I mean? And because I just despised, and I didn't know it at the time until I was an adult and I was diagnosed with I was diagnosed with dyslexia as an adult. That's why I hated reading books. It wasn't because I was just, like, so adverse to ELA. I had dyslexia, so it was a legit struggle doing that. But the fact that I was forced to do 4 years of reading in English, but I only had to do 3 years of science, but I really wanted to do 5 years of science, and math. That's what I really hated about high school, and college was even worse. I think that they're criminals for forcing you to pay for an elective. I think that's just crime.
Yeah. Yeah, you're really opening a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, I do.
We're going to get political all of a sudden when you're not even trying to be political. I had a guy comment on my videos the other day, and he's like, you're just being political with that. And I was like, what did I say about, I literally avoided what you're talking about. And he's like, yeah, avoiding it is being political. And I'm like, you can't win,
Okay,
come on.
if you say so. Yeah, no, I'm with you there.
Very cool. If you are in the chat, do me a favor. We usually wrap up every show the same way, and that is, we know there's some bad apples out there. We know there's some folks in our industry that will sometimes make us look a little bad. We also know there's some good apples out there. And if you know a good apple, a good heating and air, a good electrical, or a good plumbing company, drop their name in the chat and where they're located. Number one, you're going to show them some love. But number two, you may end up showing them a little more than love. You might actually, you never know, somebody in your area might see your comment and show that company a little more than love and show them some business. So while you guys are doing that, if you do that, share that in the chat and I will highlight that. Tersh, I end the show every week the same exact way. And that is, I'm going to ask you a question. The question is, if you think about your closest family member that doesn't live with you, and whoever that is, if you were to give them a piece of advice, they're about to buy a heating and air system, what's that piece of advice?
Oh, man. This has to be just one piece of advice?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
Let it spill.
Dehumidification is more important than sear rating. Sear rating is garbage, especially in the deep south. Man, they will oversize an evaporator coil to get a good sear rating and then can't dehumidify worth the crap. Yes, get the system right. Don't buy a train. We install a train.
You go get me in trouble, Tony.
Tony's been a Carrier guy forever. Like he's
like, one of those, huh?
He's like, man, we need to swap over to Carrier. I was like, well, go ahead, you do it. You in charge. No, dehumidification is such a big deal. Duct work, man, make sure the system's sized properly, but man, make sure the duct work is sized properly. Make sure you don't have garbage duct work that's 50 years old, got some garbage, Tony and I I wouldn't say Tony and I, it was more Tony than anything, but was actually looking at a job, and they had cardboard ductwork and a brand new XV20 system. And I was like, man, who missed that? Like half of it was all freaking, what did he say? Is it really bad to oversize the evaporator? In the deep south, it is bad. I will be the first one to tell you that I am not one of these super tech smart people. That's definitely Brian or Jim Bergman thing. But oversizing an evaporator coil to get a higher SEER rating is not a good thing here. I think that it's perfectly fine up north where you don't have the humidity level that we have.
I'm learning something myself. Does it lower the latent capacity or like?
Oh man, don't be asking me technical questions like that.
Okay, no, I would love to.
Definitely.
This will be the rabbit hole I dive into this week.
I learned this because I went to HVAC school symposium, and I was like, man, like just put a single stage condenser on there with a TXV and an oversized coil. And they're like, your train rep told you to do that, didn't they? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly who told me to do it. And they're like, that's not right. That's like you're tricking the system so that you can get you an ARI number that is a 16 SEER, but you are definitely hurting the system. It depends on where you're at in Texas. So if you're listening to this podcast episode and you're not watching the video, I didn't even see their name. Oh, they said, I think I have a problem. My evaporator is bigger than the condensing unit and I'm in Texas. Don't
read them the comments, Tersh. They need to join us live every Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. I'm just kidding. I'm just
No,
kidding.
no, you're right. You're right.
No,
Maybe
no,
you
I'm
need
kidding.
to.
Go ahead.
But yeah, no, it's not always a problem. Depending on how dry and arid the air is. Now, if you're in Phoenix, Arizona, I bet you it'll work great. Because it's very dry area. But here in South Georgia, like Tony says, dehumidification and duct sizing to make sure that return is big enough, because there's so many times that people, especially on spec houses, where they'll put the smallest ductwork in that they can, the smallest air conditioning unit that they can, uh, make sure the house is sealed properly. Like, but before you go and do some like spray foam on a house that used to breathe, just understand that you need to bring in some fresh air. You need to bring in some outside air, and filter it, through an ERV or something like that. And honestly, man, like the brand of the equipment, I mean, don't shoot me, manufacturers, but that doesn't matter. Like it's really who's installing it. Like, do they care? Are they pulling a vacuum? Are they purging with nitrogen while they're soldering? These little things that used to not matter when it was a R22, compressor, that not a scroll, like, you got your hermetic compressor that will just take liquid pounding into it and it'll just live for 20 years. That doesn't work anymore like that. Like
Those
the
were the
guys,
days.
those were the days. You just dump R22 as a liquid straight into the head of the compressor, and it's like, and
Yeah.
it just takes it, But it's not like that anymore. So like it matters when you're installing a system. The people who have the proper training, the people who have, it's a big difference than what it used to be. You used to, like, beer can cold, we're good. Like,
And you were good. That's
you
the
were,
thing.
yeah, and you could rock and roll and be fine with it, and it would last you 10 years and no problem at all, not have another service call. But now it's like, it's got to be sized properly. You got to have the right line sets. You have to have, you pull the proper vacuum on and everything, and then do a decay test and those little things. And it's crazy. Like, I don't want to sound like an infomercial for Jim and Measure Quick and everything that Bill Spone's, offering at TrueTech Tools. But man, like, the tools that are there, sure, they're not cheap, but they will make a system install last so much longer. And doing a proper startup, like using something like Jim Bergman's Measure Quick or something like that. If there is anything else, I don't think there is, but doing a proper startup and sizing the ductwork is a big deal. Like, I hear so many times where people are like, yeah, I have a 2-ton and it wasn't running very well, so I had them put a 3.5-ton in. I was like, oh yeah. And now you're wondering why you have mold growing in every single closet and every, like, cabinet. And, oh yeah, by the way, they put it on 2-ton ductwork too. Gotcha. I understand. And so what? We got to get new and better tools, sir. No, Tony. I was talking about everybody except you. No,
It's been a lot of fun having Tony on here.
I think we need to kick Tony out of here. It's getting expensive. No, it's Tony. Tony's a cool guy. I love Tony. He knows that he gets all kinds of crazy tools. Like, every time something cool comes out, Tony's got it. And it's funny watching, like, what was that thing called? The Drain Cat. And I was like, man, you got to have one of these. And he was like, why? I was like, because I just seen it on TrueTech Tools website. And he was like, all right, bet. I was like, here you go, let's get it. So yeah, he's always getting some new tools, different pro presses and everything else. And he's got to have a big old van to just tote around all the tools he gets. But yeah, no, for a friend of mine, a family member that's getting an HVAC system, hopefully they live far enough away where we don't have to install it. because that's every time you mix family and installs together, it turns into ex-family members. Or that's how I feel anyways.
Well, very cool. Well, I do want to say thank you for being a guest tonight. It's those of you that have hung around this late. I know it's kind of getting a little late on the East Coast, and so thank you to all you folks. We will be back next week, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, same time. Again, I will be on the road. I'll be in Dallas, Texas next week. I'm gonna try to bring a light or two and my camera and try to do this thing live.
Man, they probably have a bunch of that stuff there.
That's a good point. I'll probably have even
you could go to like the
setup.
Yeah, you can go to the vendor booth and say, "Hey, I'm about to do the live stream. Let me try out your product, see if I want to buy it or not."
Yeah, I'll drag all my stuff out in front of all these other huge YouTubers and this so they can make fun of me and then let me borrow their stuff. And
yeah,
I'll have the best production ever.
Yeah.
But that's a really good point, actually. I might
say, hey, give me some advice over here. Like, what do you think I should do? And then here, you hold the camera while I do that.
Amen. Yeah, take advantage. I actually, that's a really good idea. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
That said, all you folks, if you are not following Tersh, why don't you, because you'll do it better than I will, just kind of plug all your stuff and where they can find you. Especially if you are a business owner, I highly recommend you follow his stuff. It changed my business, and I followed you all the way up until I knew I was going to sell my business. And cool. It's just crazy.
I appreciate it. Honestly, if you Google Tersh, that's about all you have to do. TERSH, and the first 3 or 4 pages are mine. And so Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. I'm not really active on YouTube, but I do have some profiles there. But yeah, just Google Tersh, Service Business Mastery. So I have my own personal branded website that's going live this week, actually. So
cool.
That'll be up too. And that's just Tersh at tersh.co.
It's your dating profile or your what's that website? OnlyFans. It's your OnlyFans.
It's my OF page. Yeah. Your old feet finder.
Yeah. Y'all find Tersh on OnlyFans. You'll see all his feet pictures.
Yeah. Like hairy toes. Ball head, hairy toes.
Good enough. Well, again, thank you guys. If you did hang out this late, we will be back next week. Thanks again, Tersh. Thanks again for everybody for your support. Again, if you're not subscribed, make sure you do that. We'll see you then. Take care.